God the Father commands you. God the Son commands you.
Make a pact with the Geek Legion of Doom.
John Keyes directs Speed Demon, and I think this movie should have been called Rogue Nun versus the Glass Ceiling. And this one stars Katie Cassidy, who you may know from the DC Arrowverse. She also is the producer on the movie, and it co-stars William H. Macy as well, to give it a little bit of prestige here. So, what is the story of Speed Demon? So, we have a rebel nun, and we know this because at the beginning of the movie, we see her waking up, and she's obviously had some type of one night stand with some guy, and she's been doing cocaine and things like that. So, you know, she's probably a, unconventional nun, shall we call it that. And she ends up going on this train with her mentor, this priest, who is a kind of a lead exorcist played by William H. Macy. But also on this train is a guy who is carrying a kind of an occult artifact, and he ends up cutting himself on this artifact, which makes him possessed ultimately. So this demon is now taking control of the train. It's kind of going runaway train, it's high speed and everything like that. And this demon is threatening to derail the train and claim all of the souls on the train for himself. So it's up to Katie Cassidy's nun, along with a small group of passengers, to try and overcome this. What will happen? You'll have to watch the movie and find out. So, is this Speed meets The Exorcist? Well, not really. But let me tell you what I think works in this movie's favour. I do think the concept is a fun one. I mean, the idea here that you're having effectively an exorcism movie on a vehicle which ultimately has a timed expiry date. This train is going super fast, and it's going to hit a bend at a certain point where it's going to derail. So we know that there is a limit to how long this is going to take, and obviously time is of an essence. They're trapped, they can't go anywhere. It's a kind of they're all captives within the kind of the train cars and things like that. So it gives it an element of captivity and a kind of a countdown and stuff where the proceedings have to go at a certain speed. I guess hence Speed Demon. So that gives it a kind of a fun idea, and we have a group of sort of passengers that you have to kind of like overcome their differences and things like this. So there's some kind of fun to be had in the kind of the concept of this movie, I would suggest. And I think William H. Macy stands out. He's a relatively small role, as you'd probably expect. A one day of shoot just to give a more of a prestigious actor, some type of name to put on the poster and everything. But he's getting quite good. There is a couple of kind of scenes where I will say I think the VFX, I mean, it's not exactly a flashy film in regards to special effects and things like that, but we do see a kind of a few shots of like rendered, trains, external shots and things like this, which I thought was quite good. There's a sequence of loads of kind of like crows are dive bombing against the train, which I think gives it some eeriness to it. Some of the lighting choices I think are fair here, and I think the characters are a little bit sort of broad, and we'll talk about them again in a minute, but I don't think necessarily the acting is necessarily bad here. It does feel kind of B-movie, I will say, but I don't think any of the acting was certainly horrible. Nothing's going to win any awards, I would suggest, but everyone here does a decent enough job if you are familiar with kind of watching low-budget B-movies and stuff, or kind of TV networks, TV style acting, of which Katie Cassidy is probably most known for. But certainly not bad acting, I would suggest. And although you might say there is some issues in regards to Katie Cassidy's nun, certainly if you are a devout Catholic, for example, you might scoff at some of the ideas presented at this movie. But if you just want to watch it as you know, a silly B movie, then there is some enjoyment to be had here, I would say. So let's talk about what doesn't work in this movie. So the movie isn't particularly flashy. We have this kind of this demonic presence and stuff, but the best we really get in regards to visuals is a kind of a guy who looks a little bit like a zombie, I guess you would say, where he's kind of possessed. But it doesn't really ever look anything particularly interesting, I have to say. It just looks like, you know, a guy with a bit of makeup on. So, not exactly thrilling visuals here. There's a little bit of VFX with kind of these kind of like glowing fireflies that kind of come out and stuff. But nothing especially flashy, I would suggest. The cover certainly makes it look like there's going to be some kind of like grand demonic presence that never happens in the movie. So it is just kind of possessed people. I will say is to have this kind of rebel nun ultimately be our protagonist. I mean, maybe I think they went a little bit too far with trying to, you know, she's doing cocaine and she's, you know, she's wearing all like this makeup and she kind of looks like, well, she looks like Cassidy, who looks more like a nun strippogram, I have to say, than an actual nun. But, you know, so again, this veers very much into kind of B-movie. And when you juxtapose this with William H. Macy, who actually comes across as quite a grounded character in his relatively small screen time here, he looks like he's in a different film, I have to say. So it's just, although I don't think the acting is bad, I think the style here is very different. I also have to say, I think some of the characterization here is, you know, it's a little bit sort of modern Hollywood, let me just say that I think some people might be not a fan of. So what do I mean? Okay, so we have our nun, who is a spunky but capable, female character. We have this little girl that she kind of teams up with, who is an intelligent, spunky yet capable kind of character. There's this kind of Asian lady who is this spunky yet capable kind of character. And then we have the guys who, one's a thief, you know, one's got a heart condition and can't really do anything physical, and one's an a-hole. So you get where I'm kind of going with that. It does feel like the characters here are written a certain way. So if you were not a fan of those modern Hollywood type tropes, I don't think this movie's going to change your mind. And everyone here really has that one defining characteristic. I think the majority of the female characters don't really have anything else other than, but they're very capable. This is the problem sometimes when people want to write proactive and positive female characters. They just tend to be homogenous in some respects, and the guys are always kind of flawed in some respects. So it does feel, I have to say, some of the character work here was very broad, shall we call it. I think the movie veers very much into kind of B-movie territory. You can't help but think this movie does seem very silly. The ending as well is so cheesy. I mean, it's so goofy to a degree. It ultimately is maybe a little bit too goofy for some. And I just don't think the movie, although I think the concept is interesting, the idea here that there's this runaway train, you never really feel like people are kind of getting thrown around. I mean, it's meant to be going at high speed, but everyone's just kind of like walking around kind of casually. They're not kind of getting thrown about or anything like that until we get to this plot device, aka this Ben, which is going to kind of career the train off the tracks. But until that point, you know, you wouldn't know that this movie, the movie's train is meant to be this runaround train. Apparently there's no other trains on the track. Things like this, you know, it's not hitting anything, it's not moving around particularly erratically or anything like that, or dangerously. Everyone's just mincing around. And visually speaking, as I say, I really don't think this movie is anything particularly interesting to kind of look at. It's just kind of like a zombie-looking guy who's having kind of like "you bitch" type kind of conversations with our characters. So I've got to say this movie is very unspectacular, I have to say. It very much feels like a sort of quickly produced, doesn't really take particularly advantage of its, admittedly somewhat interesting premise. And I think the character work here is so broad and so sort of thinly written that it's a 3 out of 10 for me. I think this movie is somewhat disposable. Watchable if you like just junk kind of possession movies, but I have to say I think this movie ultimately is, you know, not going to be for a lot of people. 3 out of 10. What were your thoughts if you've seen it? Leave me a comment and I'll look forward to seeing you next time.
Malthus wants you.